Got a foggy day here in Memphis, dense fog, but we got some great guests lined up for you. So stay inside, watch your phone or your laptop, wherever. Brendan Martin and I got a great show. Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South, will join us in the first segment. Jordan Davis Hill, 24/7 Sports on Georgia, is in right after that. And then Yancy Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, and Rodney Orr, Tider Insider will check in with us. So lots to cover in the SEC. Football, basketball. Take a picture with your phone of the QR code, and we'll be able to get you lots of information every day. We do it about 260-something times a year. Got some more stuff we're going to be talking about later in the show. We'll be doing today and again tonight. So, Connor O'Gara, it is not football season, but welcome aboard. It's never not football season in the South. Your alma mater, Indiana, had a hell of a year. So what's the new bar there? 11-1 every year with Kurt Signetti. But let's talk about the temperature in college football 2 weeks after the national championship, and the Big Ten did it 2 years in a row.
Yeah, something that, according to the NCAA, hasn't happened since the Lyndon B. Johnson administration, wherein the Big Ten won consecutive national championships. And so, from that standpoint, I think for the nationalization of the sport, there's a feeling that, hey, this is actually good to see teams above the Mason-Dixon have a chance to win a national title. And I think that there is something to be said for that. I think some are getting a little bit carried away that the Big Ten is taking over college football. I think that if we're just going to base that on a 2-year sample size, wherein I think you just had two really good teams. Michigan last year was awesome, and it returned so much experience, and it felt like a very win-now team. And Ohio State had a $20 million roster, and nobody else did. And it maximized that in an expanded playoff. And so to make this assumption that, well, the Big Ten is now taking over college football, I would look at the depth of the Big Ten behind those teams and still kind of scratch my head and go, I don't know if that's a definitive statement, and that should be the takeaway from this season.
Well, you look at the SEC's run this year, not a lot of great quarterbacks in the league. There's probably some coming up. Everybody's talking about Arch Manning. Is Nico Iamaleava going to live up to the billing? But the viewership was down about 3.5 million from the previous year. Any reasons why? One or two things come out?
No, I mean, I think quarterback play was a little bit. I definitely think quarterback play was disappointing in the SEC. And if you're trying to make the argument that the SEC is falling off the face of the earth, I would push back by saying was it just as simple as there was maybe less quarterback, like elite quarterback play in this conference than what we expected, because we came into the year thinking maybe 7 of the top 10 Heisman Trophy candidates were from the SEC, and they were SEC quarterbacks. And instead, it just did not end up playing out that way. And maybe it's just better year overall for defenses. Quarterbacks just did not make that next step in the way that we thought that they would. But I do think that, if you're looking at this and trying to figure out, well, why is viewership potentially down? We have the expanded playoff. I think there are just probably other ways to be able to watch the sport and consume the sport. And so sitting there, and watching a full game live on a Saturday maybe isn't consumed the same way that normally is. But I mean, based on everything that we've put together with our site, Saturday Down South, and tried to figure out what our college football fans still into, they still very much care, and that's kind of all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, Connor, we were having a discussion the other day about NIL fatigue, transfer portal discussion fatigue with the general fan. Do you feel like that they're sort of worn out a little bit with it?
Yeah. And I try and not beat a dead horse with that stuff. It's a lot, and I get why people have to do it. Okay, and I'm glad that there are people like Ross Dellinger and Andy Staples who can break this stuff down, and we need that because our sport is changing at such a rapid pace. And I'm fully on board with them discussing it, writing about it, all those things. Like I fully get that. But when I'm sitting here breaking down stuff in early April, do I want to be talking about all of the revenue sharing and, this is what the future of the sport, the house settlement, this is what this is going to look like? I think fans care about football. I think they want to know, hey, if you're a Georgia fan, do we have receivers that can catch passes instead of dropping them this year?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a Florida fan. Is DJ Lagway going to be the best Florida quarterback since Tim Tebow? You want to know these things more so than whether or not your team is going to have this amount of money to be able to distribute to its roster, and this is what it's going to look like here, there, that, and the other. And I think fans still care about football, and there's still definitely a place to be able to talk about it, but there is that fatigue. And I understand exactly why that fatigue is there, because our sport is changing at a very rapid pace and it's relevant. But I think there is definitely a desire to want to talk about the actual games that happen on fall Saturdays.
Yeah. And when Tony Barnhart was on the Buddy Martin show last Wednesday, I think it was, Brendan, and he made the same comment. He said, fans, we're talking about football. So we're going to make this a place of a sanctuary where we talk about the games. It's hard as it is. I don't care what kind of car they drive. I mean, we all know what's going on. Connor, look at the SEC heading into next year. What are some trending storylines that you're writing about where people can follow you? Because you have a great database. You've got tons of content that comes out every day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think much like last year, we expect quarterback play to be awesome. Now, I think it's less proven coming into this 2025 season, and there's a little bit more projection that's involved. But you look at the quarterbacks that are coming back in the SEC, and I'm putting together quarterback rankings, and I'm like, guys, I got Taylor Green at number 10, and there are other years where he's probably cracking the top 5, and you're looking at the top 4 going, man, I'm leaving out a guy like Nico. I don't think that Nico probably showed enough, despite the fact that he's the only returning quarterback in the SEC who could say, I led my team to the college football playoff. And you look at guys like Lagway, who I'm just so fascinated by, and I think has so many tools working in his favor based on the sample size that we saw from him in his true freshman season. And then an Arch Manning, who, look, now is Arch's time. And this is what we've all been waiting for since talking about him when he was a freshman and sophomore in high school. And now we're going to get to finally see this play out with a Texas team that, in my opinion, deserves to start off number 1 in the country because of what it returns on defense, not so much what it has on offense. But I think that there are guys like that, and Lenora Sellers, who, even sitting there at the end of the season saying this guy's the best player in college football. And I'm like, he probably should be an all SEC quarterback coming into this season. Will he be? We'll wait and kind of see on that. But there are just a lot of guys at the top. And I didn't even talk about the guy that I have number 1 in my quarterback rankings, and that's Garrett Nussmeier, who I think can pick a defense apart. Had a tough mid-season stretch there, a 3-game stretch where I thought he had to work through some of those issues. But is a guy coming back that I'm like, man, he should be one of the 3 or 4 best returning quarterbacks in all of college football. So there's so much talent at that position. When you start there, it kind of sets the table for everything else.
It does. And you think about quarterback play, Nico, in the SEC games, one of my Tennessee guys was talking about he averages about 169 yards. He gets to about 207 above that. But as far as development, he was a redshirt freshman. We remember he played against Iowa. But I think we're trying to microwave these guys to the top, and that's a mistake.
Yeah, it's difficult with Nico because everybody knows about the backstory.
Yeah.
The
About that other
NCAA.
thing.
Yeah, and not to go down the NCAA rabbit hole,
Yeah.
but everybody knows that background and how high priced he was, admittedly high priced coming in. And the promise I think that he showed, not just even in the Iowa game, but in those first couple games to start the season, and you see the throws that he's making, you're going, buddy, in this system, with the way that Heupel can scheme guys open and what they have as a floor with their ground game, you feel good about that.
Yeah.
But then he never quite reached that level that I think so many people thought he would be at by the end of the season. And, it's difficult because we've seen guys in his position, redshirt freshmen or second-year players. Bryce Young won the Heisman Trophy as a second-year player. Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy as a second-year player. Yeah. And we are conditioned now to think, well, that's on the table. Anything is on the table for these guys. So yes, sometimes we can get ahead of ourselves and we need to be reminded, hey, this guy's got 4 career starts, 5 career starts. He's still working through some of these things. And it's not necessarily this linear progression that we assume, but I do have questions about Nico, and I do have questions about now with these weapons looking a lot different coming into next season. of whether or not he's going to be able to carry a team to the playoff, because he did not carry them to the playoff. He helped guide them to the playoff. Dylan Sampson carried that team to the playoff this past year, and that defense did as well with a great offensive line, and they were really good in the trenches. So I think that's more so the question about Nico, and I'm not calling him a bust or anything like that. I just think we have more questions than what we had originally anticipated.
And you think about running backs, Dylan Sampson out of Baton Rouge, 23 touchdowns, what have you. Go back just a couple of years ago. I remember Georgia had in 21, 13 running backs on the roster. Looking at that position, compare it to the wide receiver position, say 10 years ago. It's like a 180 flip, isn't it? I mean, everybody's talking about the wideouts now.
Yeah, and Tennessee was a little bit of a throwback with that, and I thought they built their offense like a team that just wanted to get to the playoff. And once they got there, you saw how banged up they were, how banged up Dylan Sampson was. He got banged up in that Vandy game. He and Squirrel White got hurt on the same play with 2.5 minutes left of the regular season finale. And I was kind of wondering throughout the whole season, like, when is this going to catch up to them? And then you see a team like Ohio State that had the stud returning back in Travion Henderson, and still they were willing to go into the portal and spend big to get a guy like Quinshon Judkins, and it paid off for them. I mean, those guys looked as fresh as possible in the national championship. Judkins was a huge part of what they were able to do. So I do think that we're kind of shifting our approach a little bit. And by the way, that's not how Josh Heupel wanted to operate. It's how he felt like he had to operate with this team, and some of the depth issues that they had at the running back position, and how much better Sampson was than I think a lot of those other backs. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting to kind of look at the running backs. And coming into last year, I was like, man, where are all the stud returning running backs in the SEC? Like, where are these guys? Stud receivers galore. But I think coming into next year, it's going to be a very interesting thing to kind of sit there and figure out, you know, some of these true freshmen, Caden Durham, Jaden Baugh, that we saw play really well this past year. We're going to be talking about them a lot more, but it doesn't feel like we have those proven commodities in the way that we did in the SEC probably during the 2010s.
So the team that can establish a dominant running game, I think, will have a clear advantage at big time. And I thought Justin Haynes would stick around out of Buford, Georgia, at Alabama. He left, and he hit that thing that we talk about. But that's a shocker.
Yeah, I thought I thought Justice Haynes to leaving for Michigan was the toughest loss that any SEC team is going to face. And I think that at Bama especially, that's a place where the trajectory of those 5-star running backs coming in is, all right, well, yeah, you're probably going to have to wait your turn first year, maybe second year, you're starting to get more reps, but you're still more of a timeshare. And then third year now is where you're really booming. And this is the time when typically at Bama, you know, Justice Haynes would be taking off. And this is now when he's going to become an all SEC running back, an all American running back. And instead, he's off to Michigan, where he's going to be in another timeshare, but he's going to be in a timeshare that's different than the one that he was in at Bama. I didn't necessarily agree with the usage of he and Jam Miller, and I've kind of talked about that a lot on my show. And it's difficult, I know, when you have a running quarterback as well in Jalen Milroe, and it's, you know, difficult to sometimes manage those carries. But yeah, it is kind of strange, because that's the type of guy, or even Judkins, you know, go back to him, where he would have come back and he would have, you know, had an all-American season in his pre-draft season in the SEC. And instead, there's just a lot more movement with these guys. A Trevor Etienne, who obviously goes from Florida to Georgia in his pre-draft season. And it's just a lot tougher to figure out. We're kind of having to determine how much are these guys worth in the open market, and should these teams be ponying up to be able to keep these running backs.
One more question before you go. You take a look at Texas A&M. Every year there's that hype. This season's going to be different, and they still were 8-4 last year. What is different about Mike Elko that they haven't had before?
He's not stubborn. I think Jimbo Fisher and Kevin Sumlin were really stubborn guys. I think Mike Elko is more willing to adapt, and I like that. I've been a big Elko guy since 2017, when he was becoming the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. And I've been a huge fan of his approach at every stop. And I remember talking to him when he got the Duke job. And one of the things that really stood out to me was, like, this is a guy who is going to go all in with this and is going to adapt to his surroundings really, really well, and kind of understands where he's at. And the lay of the land is really important at a job like Texas A&M. And when you understand that 8-4 is the punching bag, it's the punchline of the joke at A&M. And Elko understands that's not acceptable, and he's not going to get on the defensive a la Jimbo Fisher, and say, well, we did this, this, and this, and we were the last team that was unbeaten in conference play. Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
You then finished down the stretch really poorly. And you saw Elko after the bowl game lost to USC, where they blew a lead once again. And he's like, we can't defend zone coverage, man. Like, we're doing things on my side of the ball, my area of expertise that I feel like we can't execute. And that's a problem. And I think Elko has done a really nice job to show that he is different, I think, than Jimbo Fisher. And that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to win a national championship and do something that hasn't been done at Texas A&M since the 1930s. But I do think that he's got the right mindset for that job. And even though this year did not finish out the way that they hoped, I still think that based on how he's handled everything so far for this 13 months on the job, I do think that he is set up better than probably the previous administration was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's great. Connor, we got to get you back on here a lot more often, because you got an answer for everything, because you do your homework. And tell people how they can follow you. And again, as always, we really appreciate you sharing your time with us.
Gentlemen, appreciate that. Yeah, Saturday Down South podcast, recording 2 times a week throughout the off season. Could have some changes coming up in the future here, but that is the plan. It's SaturdayDownSouth.com. We have a lot of great content, not just SEC football, but we dig into ACC stuff, we dig into national stuff. We've got college basketball content galore as well. College baseball starting up soon. So yeah, I always tell people it is the one-stop shop for any college sports fan.
Love it. Thanks so much.
Hey, I just tweeted to you, Connor. So you should have a notification from us. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right, we've got Rob
Jordan Davis Hill.
Jordan Davis Hill coming to check in with us. Hey, Jordan, how are you, sir?
Great. Talking some college football. Those other 2 topics, and you know what we're talking about. Brendan and I had a strategy skull session the other night, so we're going to try to leave those on the side of the road, because Tony Barnhart's advice the other night was great. Man, people still, all they care about really is the games, and all those distractions, they're just distractions. So you got Georgia football, basketball, a lot happening in Athens. Nobody knows more than you. Tell us the stories that we need to know about, starting with this Georgia football team getting ready to, by Georgia's standards of recent, this wasn't a great season, but I still think it was Kirby's best job coaching, considering what he had to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing that we're talking about right now around the Georgia football program is Colby Young, a receiver that was suspended last October for an arrest. He reached a plea deal last week, and Georgia hasn't given official word, and I doubt that they will, but all indications are Colby Young's going to be back at Georgia in 2025, and that's a big win for Georgia and those receivers. 6'4" guy, a guy that they counted on to play a lot at the X position, and he got suspended after the Alabama game, and I think that they really lacked, and that absence really hurt them, not having that big receiver out wide. And you're talking about potentially getting him back. They went and added Noah Thomas from Texas A&M, another big receiver. I think Noah Thomas is like 6'5", 6'6". So that's a huge boost right now. And yeah, besides really the Colby Young situation following that, just continuing to go through winter workouts. And Rob, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but it's just so weird how different the calendar is. Tomorrow is that traditional signing day, and hand up, I didn't really think about it until someone asked this morning, was like, what's happening? And I was like, not a whole lot. I'm not really expecting a ton of news on the recruiting side for Georgia on that front, but that's just a product of how crazy the calendar is and just how drastic
it really is. And there, just a few years ago when this stuff started, you would have players say, I'm going to wait until February to sign with some of my teammates. I'm curious what the numbers are in a typical year. 134 Division I schools. You might have 3,400 kids out of high school sign with that portal thing, and obviously junior college and all. Any idea what those numbers are now?
No idea, but it's changed so drastically to the point you just made that I really think when they first made that December window, the thought was, okay, we're going to have a small percentage of guys who are already decided, and they're going to go ahead and sign now, and then everybody else is going to sign in February. And the idea was, okay, December is going to be the early period, and then February is going to be the traditional period. It took maybe a year for it to become December is the period, and then February is the late period. So, I mean, we've kind of gotten to the point where we don't even really need that February signing period. And I think if we got to a point where they eliminated it, there wouldn't be a lot of hubbub. There wouldn't be a lot of, because you have a few guys, like you said, that are still waiting. But, I mean, the majority of teams are getting that class put together in December. And, again, as long as nothing crazy happens, I think that Georgia will have 2 years in a row where it didn't sign anybody in February. There have been a few guys they've reached out to this year, and I know that was the case last year. I think it was Terry Bussey, who is at Texas A&M, was a guy they really wanted late, and he winds up going to A&M instead. But, it's just wild. The recruiting landscape, particularly with the calendar, has just changed so dramatically.
I mean, we've always had guys that wait late. One that was definitely worth the wait was Easter Sunday afternoon after church services, Herschel Walker. That was long before you were born, but I still remember that because that was a big, big story. And considering the media,
National Signing Day, Rob, we used to have guys that would sit by the fax machines, and they would send us rip and reads when they came across. It was like, oh, who's next? We had 1-900 numbers that you would call in and pay to find out who signed where and who when. So, that was literally how Gatorade magazine started. Was recruiting.
There were guys that would use fictional names for 2 or 3 different schools to cover them because they had a 900 number. God, I've forgotten 900 numbers. They sucked the life out of a lot of people. When those bills would come in, your wife would, what is this? It's football recruiting, I thought it was all kind of stuff. But all right, Jordan, basketball now. Things are different with Georgia. Mike White, he's starting. This Asa Newell is a special player. God, he's really talented. 6'10", 11. Again, I go to a lot of Grizzlies games. When you see a Kevin Durant, Blake Griffin, those kind of guys right up close that are that big that can shoot like that, what can Asa Newell not do? And what does he mean to Georgia?
I mean, he's huge. He's by far their best player. I mean, and he's done such a good job, and he's just so effortless around the rim. I mean, the thing that has impressed me the most is just his ability to finish through contact. I think the biggest thing you would knock him on at this point is his three-point shooting, because he came in and said, that was going to be a part of his game. And in SEC play, I think he's not been as accurate from deep as he wanted to be. But no, I mean, I wrote about this, Rob, on Monday. Georgia fans are a little upset with how they've been playing lately. I think they've lost maybe 4 of their last 5. They're still in a really good spot as far as making the NCAA tournament. Now, they got to finish strong. They got 9 games left. I think they need to win at least 4 to feel good about where they are. But no, I mean, they've got a really good resume. We're talking about a program, Rob, that has not made the NCAA tournament in 10 years. Just think about how wild that is. I mean, that puts Georgia at the bottom of the SEC, and it's something that Mike White was hired to change. And, they've had their ups and downs. I know they're still kicking themselves after losing at Arkansas, when that second half they were up 15, but they're still in a good spot. They got to take care of business going forward, and that starts Wednesday. They host LSU. Rob, I'm going to have to get a coffee maker put in over at Stegman. This game tips off at 9 Eastern. I don't know why we're having to do this, but it's going to be a late night. It's going to be a late night in Stegman.
And I think about Georgia, again, we all know it depends on what part of Atlanta, metro Atlanta you're in, but, an hour or less, and 6.5 million people spread out over 22 counties. There's enough talent there to build a national championship caliber program. Georgia Tech's going to be there. Auburn, Tennessee, they're going to come in there and get players. But it's always, if Georgia can get this stuff aligned, they have absolutely unlimited potential for basketball. Switching back to football, Kirby Smart and the staff right now. Let's talk about whatever changes that have occurred. I don't know of any, and what they're trying to do heading into spring practice. And when specifically, Paul Wickenheiser, watching out in Reno, Nevada, huge Georgia fan. We call him the Burgermeister, grew up in Atlanta. Wanted to know, when do my dogs start spring football practice?
So they haven't announced it yet, but based on everything I've seen, I believe it'll be
Okay.
Tuesday, March 11th, which is it falls in line with what they've done every single year. They, for whatever reason, Rob, they want to keep that close to the vest when it's the same thing they've done every single
Don't
year,
tell
or at
anybody.
least don't tell nobody. I don't know why they got to play it close to the vest, but I think March 11th is when it's going to get going. And to date, they haven't made any staff changes. I think the biggest thing at this point, we're just going to have to keep an eye out in case of guys going to the NFL. I would watch specifically on that defensive side of the ball, but so far everybody's still on board. There were those rumors that we had to deal with for a little bit about Mike Bobo's retiring. Everything I've heard is that that's not the case, that he plans on being back. Again, unless somebody gets an NFL opportunity, join an NFL staff, I think the staff is in place. I know some Georgia fans would be frustrated hearing that, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for that staff continuity. And again, if you are making a change, we're talking about a little bit over a month before spring practice gets started. So if they're making one,
now
they better
this
move
home
on.
schedule coming up for Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama. Is this going to be the hardest season ticket pack to get you can ever remember in Georgia football history?
Yeah, and I think the biggest reason why, Rob, is because, I mean, to be completely fair, like Georgia fans have gotten shafted when it comes to home
Yeah.
games. The home slate the last few years has just been really weak. And, going back to when the 2024 schedule was first announced, I was shocked that Alabama game was in Tuscaloosa just because of the last time that they had played in the regular season. That would have been 2020. It was in Tuscaloosa. Georgia hadn't hosted Alabama since 2015. I kind of thought that they would, kind of even it up and let them have that home game. But I do think it kind of works out. And I tell you, there's nobody happier with this home slate than Kirby Smart, because every single time he brought up, the schedule they were playing last season, or, if he was asked about, well, what do you want the schedule to be going forward? He's like,
Yeah.
I want my home games back. Basically, I want to get paid back for having to have gone to Tuscaloosa, to Austin, to Oxford. So I get that standpoint for sure. And if you're going to bring the season ticket package, if you're paying for it this year, I'm imagining that's probably a birthday gift, a Christmas gift, maybe a couple birthday gifts, because I think you'll be paying a pretty penny.
Yeah, and when you're Georgia right now, you are the game of the year for most schools, one of the biggest games in school history. And you know as well as I do, Brendan knows that that's a lot of stress on those coaches and players, because you can't have an off day because you're that team's number one focus. So I'm with you about Georgia's home schedule the last few years. It has been rough. And typically you have 8 home games, but you had to go to Atlanta, then you go to Jacksonville. So that took a lot. You took a Clemson game that could have been a home game, and Florida, which is not. But all right, Jordan, I always want to say this too, and Brendan will back me. We thank you a million, because you bring a lot. You have a lot of followers and stuff like that. So tell us what we can do to help grow your brand. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. I see these numbers every time you're on here. So let us know that and how people can follow you, and look forward to having you on again next week, because you are absolutely first class.
I appreciate that. Good to pop back on with y'all. And tell everybody to go to dogs247.com. We'll be running a 50% off, might be a 60% off sale on Wednesday as part of that traditional National Signing Day. And keeping it going on Twitter, keeping it going at Jordan Davis Hill, at Dogs247, and staying busy with men's basketball. Like we said earlier, spring practice for football will be here before you know it. And just going to keep on keeping on.
Well, you're like an electronic newspaper, because I see you on X. I mean, it's active. So, folks, you love Georgia, no matter where you are on the planet. Follow Jordan Davis Hill. Thanks so much. Have a great day. You bet. Let's say something about one of our sponsors before we go to Yancy Porter from Rebel Yell Hotline. LandersFordMemphis.com. They are open every day of the week except Sunday, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Service department, they're going to pick you up, take you in, take you back. They have 3 full-time drivers, and they have more on standby if they need them. And take $500 off when you're in there, and let them know you heard about them on Sidelines. Poplar and Houston Levy out in Collierville. landersfordmemphis.com. Again, lots of opportunities to save big on vehicles. Watch the screen, the Ford Power Promise. These F-150s, you can power your home for about 30 hours. You need to learn about this. Ask for the general manager, Brad Bellamy. Great people right down the street from another one of our sponsors we love. We love them all. Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. You live in the Mid-South, that's in Shelby County where Memphis is. Just go straight out Poplar, take a right on Center Street, and it's right there on the square. They have a ginormous selection of men's and women's boots, all kinds of Western boots, work boots. They've got Filson luggage, gear, Barber. God, they got a great selection of Barber men's and women's gear. It sells really fast. Duckhead collection, you'd think it was the 1980s all over again. They got everything Duckhead. That company's been around since 1865. Very simple. You can order online. They will ship anywhere. Their website's been updated. Go in there, see what you like. Let them know you heard about them on Sidelines. Charles Hall, the owner, JM, Raven, everybody there committed to making the customer experience pleasurable. That segues us in to Rebel Yell Hotline, one of the hosts, Yancy Porter, down in Oxford, Mississippi. Catch that show Monday nights at 6 p.m. Central on Sports 56 WHBQ in Memphis and all over the Magnolia State on Super Talk Mississippi with Yancy Porter, Chuck Rounsville, Harry Harrison, Gary Darby, Gordon Ford. You will learn a lot. Yancy, man, Chris Beard is building an atmosphere, a culture at Ole Miss basketball. He's the most intense guy that I can remember coaching there, honestly, since Bob Weltlich, who was a disciple of Bobby Knight in the early 80s. But Auburn fortunate to get out of there with the win Saturday. Ole Miss is 5-4, 16-6 overall. Kind of, where does this Ole Miss basketball team finish out, in your opinion? Got a second half of the season still to go.
Yeah, I thought Ole Miss played much better this past week. They had kind of gotten a little bit of slump after winning there at Alabama a couple weeks back, and had a bad next 2 or 3 games. Lost 2 right there at the buzzer to Mississippi State. One of them there, the game after Alabama, that kind of took them about a week and a half to get over. But they're playing a lot better ball. They played well against Auburn. Auburn's just that good. They just absolutely shot it lights out. I think they were 14 for 28 from 3-point land. I don't think they left that game obviously disappointed, but I think they knew that that they played well. That Auburn's just that good.
Well, you look at the players. Ole Miss, they can definitely shoot. Talk about this team and the players Chris Beard is bringing in, because there's a lot of opportunities to go get players, and Ole Miss has a strong financial statement. They can go get whoever they want.
Yeah, man. As you saw, I'm sure you got to catch some of the Ole Miss Auburn game. It's a positionless team. There's not really a 1 through 5. Everybody handles the ball. Everybody shoots it from the outside, and that was kind of the goal of the roster construction. He didn't want the traditional 2 or 3 or 4 big guys that play with their back to the bucket. He wanted guys that could play 1 through 5, and I feel like that's what they have. Are they as talented as maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of the elite programs like Auburn and Alabama? Specifically, they're not. Even though they beat Alabama, but they're not as talented as those guys. But it takes years to build a program, and Beard's in year 2. He won 20 games his first year. You got to remember now that this is a program that when Beard took over had won 10 games when he took it over. So it was not in good shape. They did have a few players to build off of, specifically Brightfield and Morrell when he took it over. And they're banged up. They've got 3 guys like Morrell and Jones Those guys are kind of playing on one leg, so to speak. So they need to get healthier. Specifically, Morrell. He just doesn't have any explosion right now. He's just gutting it out. But that's a guy that you normally lean on, to kind of be the third wheel with Brayfield and Sean Padula. So they're missing that third wheel, that consistent third wheel right now. Dre Davis is who they kind of hope to be that guy, but as you saw against Auburn, he gets two early fouls. He sits out the next 10 minutes of the last 10 minutes of the first half, and then he gets a foul early in the second half, and then he's out again for 10 more minutes. Sometimes he has hard time staying on the court. So Morrell's going to be a key from here on out to me. Getting him back healthy would do wonders for this roster.
Yeah, and Chris Beard, I mean, he's got a hell of a staff too, and they are packing it in. I think that was the third largest crowd in the history of Ole Miss basketball. And the Pavilion venue, you were right on top. I don't think you're more than 40 or 50 feet away any seat from the court. So that is a great selling point. Yancy, before Rodney Orr chimes in here from Tider Insider, one more question. You look at Ole Miss. This is a football question. Quarterback room. Let's talk about that heading into spring practice, and then I want to have a similar question with Rodney Orr after Yancy's response.
Yeah, I think your Ole Miss is a little bit different at Alabama. At Alabama, they might be leaning a direction there for the quarterback replacement, but at Ole Miss, it's solidified. This is Simmons' team. He's the man. He's the guy. He's the face of the program. There are no ifs, ands, and buts about who's going to be the quarterback next year, barring injury. Backing him up is really all eyes are on Maddox, Anthony Maddox from Oak Grove, Mississippi. He was kind of the surprise of the camp. By that, I mean they weren't expecting him to be this far along, developed and ready made as he was when he entered Ole Miss last spring. You got to remember he had a chance to go through spring practice as a freshman, so he's going through his second spring practice this year when he'll go through spring drills. So he's a guy that will be a redshirt freshman status on paper, but he's a guy that has a lot of experience behind him. So I think they feel really good about where they stand at the quarterback position. And undoubtedly, as you know, any Lane Kiffin team is going to go as the quarterback goes.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're feeling better. I know you've been feeling rough the last week or so with a cold, and great. This is you cannot talk enough SEC college football. Rodney Orr, Tider Insider, folks. It's only $48 a year, almost 30 years. There's no comparison. When you are a subscriber to Tider Insider, you will find out everything you need to know, and they have incredible forums for the fans, a lot of topics and discussions that they talk about. They talk about the games and the people that play them. And Rodney, being the Alabama quarterback, next to the governor and the coach of Alabama is a pretty big deal. Right now, I know you talked about it some last week. Who do you look to jump out to an early lead, or do you have hopes for anybody in particular?
Well, first of all, I think Ty Simpson obviously is going to be the guy going in to spring that's going to be kind of set apart a little bit. Again, it's going to be up to him in spring to kind of take the bull by the horns. I think Ty's got tremendous ability, potential, a lot of incredible physical tools, but there's something about playing the quarterback position that you can't really answer until you see a guy in the fire. How does he respond? What's his maturity level? What kind of leadership does he have? All of these different things. So it can overwhelm someone. It's why there's not a lot of great quarterbacks. It's not so much about physical tools because there's so many that have, the gifts, but they don't have, all of those things between the ears. So with that said, I think we're going to find out a lot about Ty this spring. Look forward to seeing him. And then, of course, Austin Mack, the transfer from Washington last year, who, was a guy that Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, who I'm sure we're going to talk about, they kind of handpicked him a few years ago. So Austin Mack, 6'6", 230 pounds, got incredible tools,
Wow.
but has a
Yeah.
lot of consistency that he needs to kind of develop. And then obviously the true freshman Keelan Russell, who was, one of the
Mhm.
top 2 high school quarterbacks in the country out of the state of Texas. So that's kind of how it stacks up headed into spring.
Well, and one other one, and I asked Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South in the first segment. Justice Haynes leaving, kid out of Buford, Georgia, going to Michigan. Were you shocked at that? And I know he was.
No, I wasn't.
Really?
Honestly, Rob, and I'll tell you guys this, and this is just the way it is. He was being recruited from August or earlier, and all of so many of these kids are just, it's constant. It's just
Yeah.
nonstop. Let's just
Yeah.
be honest. I'm not saying Alabama doesn't do it. I'm not saying they all don't do it, but the point of saying it is to answer your question. No, I'm not really surprised. I don't think this year turned out for whatever reason like he hoped. And you know what? He decided to transfer and went to Michigan. And he's a really good player. He's a really good player. But that running back room, it's going to be interesting to watch that room. With
Yeah.
Jam Miller back, with Richard Young, who's a freshman, a redshirt freshman last year, he'll be a redshirt sophomore. A lot of people, really liked what he did towards the end of the year. Obviously you've got some other guys coming back. Daniel Hill out of Meridian, who's more of a power back, short yardage guy. And then, Kevin Riley from right here in Tuscaloosa. There's been a lot of buzz about him. He was kind of unsung a little bit. He's got a great gear to him. You got AK Deer coming in, the true freshman out of Quitman, Mississippi, who was one of the top running backs in this past recruiting class. And then also you got Draylon Washington transferred in from University of Louisiana there, who has got a little gear to him. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it definitely will. Yancy, along those lines, talking about the running back room, receivers, the skill players, receivers get all the love now. And Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin, in the last 8 years, Ole Miss has had some of the best receivers in the country. Ole Miss, LSU, Alabama. I mean, it's been a hell of a run. Are we going to see something similar this year with Ole Miss football?
Well, that's a big question mark. They obviously grabbed four-star portal receivers, so they brought in a lot of talent on paper. Will it translate on the field when everybody meshes together? Caden Lee, who's kind of was the rock this past season once Trey Harris went down. I don't, Trey Harris had over 1,000 yards in receiving and only played one SEC game. That's amazing if you think about it. It's he was the go-to guy for Dart, Caden Lee, but you got a new guy at the at the center caller, so we'll see who Simmons' go-to guy will be. But they brought in a ton of talent in the portal. Matter of fact, they brought in more top 100 guys in the portal from the wide receiver position than all the schools. So we'll see that they brought in the 5-star receiver Caleb Cunningham out of here in Mississippi.
Yeah.
That a lot could be expected from him as well. So usually under a Lane Kiffin offense or team in general, the two last positions you're worried about is wide receiver and quarterback.
Yeah. That's a great point. And they've 1,000 yards. Rodney, that's a great trivia question. Who was the wide receiver in the SEC that had 1,000 yards receiving in a season and only played in one SEC game? That
is amazing.
I mean, I guess I don't think I've ever seen that happen before, guys.
Yeah, he was averaging close to 220 yards a game when he got injured. He injured his groin, and matter of fact, it's costing him a ton of money. He came back for the Florida game after sitting out, I believe, for 6 straight SEC games. And the very first quarter, he re-injured the groin again and had to have surgery on it. Now, I don't know if he's going to be able to go through the combine there in Indianapolis. He certainly wasn't able to go through the Senior Bowl. So it's they're projecting him towards the end of the first round, and that's a mid first round guy.
Yeah,
Cost him a lot of money.
yeah, it has. Very likely will. And Rodney, it's going to be tough to pull Alabama fans away from basketball, thinking about spring football with the way this team is playing. The Fighting Oats, man, golly, those guys play hard. They play a fun style of basketball. But that you can also recruit to football by bringing those kids in to see the basketball games. And one of the biggest non-events since the last ice age takes place tomorrow, guys. National Signing Day. Is anybody going to sign tomorrow? Or wait a minute, don't you remember this question in high school, guys? If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Will National Signing Day even be reported tomorrow, Rodney?
Well, maybe for somebody, I don't know. Alabama's not expecting
Can
anybody
you believe we're having
that
to
I'm
ask
aware
this
of.
question?
Yeah, it's really come down to now the late signing period, or for the colleges that had coaching changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really what it's boiled down to now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, the early signing period is just, kind of where it's all at, obviously. Now, I don't know what they're going to do with this late signing period. I mean, are they going to continue to have it? Is it even worth it? I mean, they need to kind of get all that figured out, I guess. But I mean, I will say this, for for the old timers like myself,
all
you
of it.
remember the 6 weeks after, January 1st leading up to the signing day.
Yeah.
Used to be in a real event, man. I mean, that was a crazy 6 weeks, rumors, all these kids every weekend were that's when they took their visits, and it
Yep.
was, then, like I said, tonight would be signing day eve.
Yeah.
So it would have been crazy today,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in a way you kind of miss that, but in a way you really don't.
Well,
It's
you
first
know,
Wednesday of every February,
yeah.
Rodney.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I mean, it was almost like tax season due date, right? On
Yeah.
April the 15th, I meant for everybody that covered recruiting, Chuck and I used to host the Ole Miss for the university signing day. There'd be 1,500 people there. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
So let me
It
ask
was
you a
a
question.
Yes.
big chaboo.
Let me ask you a question. I don't whoever. Some of these signing days that we've seen through the years, they've had a lot of memorable moments. Is there one that sticks out to anybody in terms of a prospect, an announcement that maybe just floored you? Or
Yeah,
maybe, what? Go
I
ahead.
think for Ole Miss's sake, ours, it was 2016 when AJ Brown spurned Mississippi State and went to Ole Miss. That's the year they signed DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, and then Simmons, the defensive tackle, spurned Ole
Yeah.
Miss and
And Alabama. Yeah.
went to Mississippi State. I think there was a lot of money that flopped hands there.
Yeah. Well, let me say this
Come
on
on
Jeffrey
now.
on
No.
Jeffrey Simmons. On
Yes.
Jeffrey Simmons.
Yeah,
Here's how much everyone was confused on him. Ole Miss thought they had him. Alabama thought they had him, and
yeah,
Mississippi State got him. And
yeah,
I know at midnight Alabama thought they had him locked up.
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, and then he steps up there and he grabbed that Mississippi State hat, and I was totally floored.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the all timer, and then I'll let you take over, Rob.
No, this is
Was
great. Keep rolling.
This is right, Rashawn Evans
Oh,
and
Yeah.
all of his connections to Auburn and all of those things, and he was a 5-star linebacker. Obviously, at Auburn High School, his dad, Alan Evans, I remember when he was at Enterprise, great running back, obviously signed
Was he
into
the
Bo
one with the
Jackson.
tattoo, the Auburn tattoo on
That's
his
Reuben
No, that was
Foster.
Reuben Foster.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah, that
Reuben
was
Foster.
Foster. That was
There's
Foster.
a lot of stories with that one too. But Rashawn Evans and Rashawn came out the year after Reuben, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so, that helped Alabama a little bit because Reuben could give him some insight. But what happened there was in early January, before the February signing day, I get a phone call. Guy says, "Listen, I'm gonna give you the tip of the year." He says, "Don't be surprised if Rashawn Evans ends up at Alabama." And I mean, everybody thought he was a lock for Auburn, right? I mean, I did. And I'm like, come on. And he goes, "You need to start really paying close attention to this, and you need to start reporting it in a way that as it builds up to signing day, that's going to put you in a position to say, hey, we were on top of this." So I did. And anyway, people on Tighter and Cider were telling me I was crazy. He's not coming to Alabama, right? Well, long story short, I stuck with my guns. Didn't say he was necessarily coming, but that I believed Alabama was in much better shape than people expected.
Yeah.
So think about this. 10 minutes before he goes on ESPN to make his announcement, the official Auburn University athletics website posts his profile as signed with Auburn.
Yeah.
Think about that. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And so I start getting scathing responses on Tighter and Cider about how naive I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I believed it was possible. He gets up there on ESPN, he starts digging in the bag. And I remember thinking, as he's digging in the bag, thinking, just pull the Auburn hat out and stop all the shenanigans, right? And he
Tomfoolery.
pulls out the Alabama hat, and I think he's getting ready to throw it on the floor. And he says, I will be spending the next 3 or 4 years at the University of Alabama. He got booed, as you might remember.
Yeah.
But I think that was one of the all-timers. And those are kind of things that I guess, we miss now with this not being as it once was.
Well, one interesting thing about Allen Evans, he came in my freshman year at Auburn out of Enterprise, Alabama, #1 ranked running back in America. But he signed in the same class as Tim Jesse, running back out of Opp, Alabama, Tommy Powell, Greenville, Alabama, Collis Campbell,
College Campbell,
out of Florence County, Coffee County High School in Florence, Alabama. Also, Tommy Agee, Maplesville, Alabama. Vincent Jackson out of McAdory, Bessemer, Alabama. And so here comes Allen Evans. And I'll tell you a true story, and I'm not going to name the names. I was sitting about almost 10 years ago in an office at Auburn, looking out over the football practice field. And my friend, whose brother was a freshman in the same class with Allen Evans, he comes in the first 3 or 4 days, they're in shorts and T-shirts. And the coaches were kind of like, well, they said he looked like an Adonis, a Greek god, Allen Evans. They said, then they put the pads on. They said he put on his tiara and his dancing shoes. He didn't like contact. But Vincent Bo Jackson was drooling over there, and Tommy Agee, those guys salivating at the prospects of contact, and they proved it. Allen Evans' career at Auburn, in 2 years, I think he had 57 yards rushing, injured his knee, transferred to UT Chattanooga, and kind of, I'm not going to lie, he blamed Auburn for his problems. And Rashawn's mother has 4 degrees from Auburn. And Allen Evans owns a grocery store there in Auburn. And I was talking to my friends in Auburn. I said, Rashawn, it was driving him crazy. He almost committed on the field the night of the kick 6. He ran out there, and his father kept saying, wait. And remember the dance-off at the hotel?
Yeah.
The Auburn coaches and the Alabama coaches.
Kirby Smart was there for Alabama. Go ahead.
They had the dance-off out there. And I was like, I talked to people that know Rashawn. I said, he's a great kid. They said, I think he just wants to get away. And they said, he'll go to Alabama. They told me that. And nothing. He's a great kid. And I think about Reuben Foster. He grew up an Alabama fan in like Roanoke or Wadley. Then they moved over to Troup County, Georgia, LaGrange. Something happened to the coach. He came back. Trooper Taylor got him to come to Auburn. He got the Auburn tattoo. But when Chiswick and Trooper all got fired after the 2012 season, Reuben went right back to Alabama, even though they tried to bring him back in. But he was always an Alabama fan. Unfortunately, he has that tattoo on there. But, and Reuben, anybody in Auburn will tell you, when that kid walks into a room, everybody wants to go talk to him. He's one of the most magnanimous personalities. And Rashawn Evans, you hate it if you're Auburn that he didn't go there. But I think he just wanted to get away and do his own thing.
You know what Saban told them? Saban told them that if he didn't sign with Alabama, he'd be making a $20 million mistake. And the reason was the system that how Auburn wanted to utilize him in Ellis Johnson's defense. And that, Saban told him, look, we're going to teach you to play every single linebacker spot, outside, inside. Your value is going to be in a pro-style defense at understanding every linebacker spot. And that was part of, Saban's sales pitch. And, I know that Rashawn, I heard Rashawn say it one day. They had a new media relations person here at Alabama and said, "Hey, Rashawn, where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from Auburn." He said, "How did you end up here?" And he said, "It was real tough."
Yeah,
So,
and I think they wanted him as a star at Auburn and the
yeah,
Jack
they
of
did.
Alabama.
They did.
Yeah,
They did.
and you know what? He's hell of a player, and I don't know what he's doing now. And you just mentioned what you said about AJ Brown, Yancy. And by the way, George out in Portland, Oregon, watching the show, big Gator fan. He says, "What is the etymology, the meaning of words behind the name Yancy?" Well, George, as you know, Yancy is a great old Southern name. I've got a friend at Auburn from Auburn who played there when I was there, named Yan Cowart from over in Selma,
Yeah.
Alabama. Yan's a great
Offensive
architect.
lineman. Mhm.
But Yancy, where did you get the name? We got George wants to know. He's very interested.
My mom, she actually went to the University of Texas, and her
Oh,
best
wow.
friend's son name was Yancey, and so that's where it came from.
Oh, I love it. I love the meaning. I had to take etymology in 7th and 8th grade over Latin, the meaning of words. But that's a great name. That story about AJ Brown, God, and Rashawn Evans.
Yeah.
Another one.
So the AJ, I don't mean to cut you off
No,
there.
go.
Simmons delayed his press conference for 30 minutes after AJ announced his, and that made the Ole Miss fans even more confident that that Simmons was going to come to Ole Miss. He had been privately committed for many months, and I remember the Bama coaches going over there allegedly the night before signing day during the dead period, and that's where Bo Davis got in all that hot water, which rumored is that State turned in Alabama during that whole deal. As you know, State was the root cause with the Ole Miss probation and the whole thing with Leo Lewis and even Dan Mullen,
Yeah.
being involved with, and that's why there's such animosity towards Ole Miss, not only State but the current SEC commissioner, because he allowed immunity for Mississippi State to set up Ole Miss during that whole thing. So
Yeah.
those were wild times. And yeah, so Simmons had actually delayed his press conference. It was an hour before AJ, and then 15 minutes before he set to announce, he said it for 30 minutes after AJ. And the wild rumors, who knows, is all that money that State lost on AJ went over there to Simmons, and before you know it, he becomes a Bulldog. So who knows with all that, but that's kind of those were the rumor mills.
You said he was privately committed.
Yeah.
Talking about private commitments, he's Schuler, privately committed to Alabama on his visit here. And of course, ended up at Tennessee going way back. That was the one that I thought in that recruiting class. It was Stallings' all-time great recruiting class. David Palmer, Damian
Yeah.
Jeffries, Willie Gaston, Sam Shade. You can go on and on and on. It was an incredible
Palmer,
class.
that's the one gosh
Yeah,
almighty, how good was he?
and Alabama thought there for a minute they had Heath Schuler, and then but he was 90 miles from Knoxville, Bryson City, Tennessee, North Carolina, Bryson City, North Carolina. So.
Yeah, and you remember the great was it Carl Pickens, great wide
Yeah,
receiver,
Yeah.
Tennessee, Murphy, North
Carolina.
Carolina, right there
Yeah.
on the border, near the Cherokee Casino. Right, Brendan. Well, somebody can answer this. I don't know what the statute of limitations is on recruiting, but I got a great idea for a podcast. Now that the time has passed, let's get some great, real, uncovered recruiting stories. I think people would love. I've got some that would blow your mind. I mean, I remember when Kurt Jarvis out of Gardendale, Alabama, and Cornelius Bennett out of Inslee High School in Birmingham, Biscuit, disappeared for a few days. Auburn thought they had them, couldn't find them.
They
I
did have
remember,
him.
yeah, Coach. I remember Frank Warren. I think before he signed out of Parker with Auburn, climbed out of a window in his classroom to hide from coaches that were coming after him. But I think that would be a really cool podcast. Need to wrap it up, guys. But hey, Rodney Orr, Tyler Insider, Yancy Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline. God, y'all want to do a podcast talking about some of these recruiting? We're going to have to do one of these things.
By the way, I hate recruiting. So
Yeah.
y'all can do your own podcast. I hate it. I never want to talk about it again. I hate
don't blame
National
you.
Signing
Recruiting's
Day.
much different now. It's only one
Yeah,
day.
I like it
Portal,
much better now. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Because I don't
very
got to cover
fast.
that anymore.
It changed to the climate of the way people are. Everybody has ADHD, right? Your
Huh?
attention
What
span is
were we
about
talking
2
about?
seconds.
Yeah.
So recruiting
Yeah.
used to be a 4-year process, especially your junior or senior year. Now it's literally with the portal, it's one day. I mean,
It is.
a prospect pops up on the board and his decision comes in a day. It is a total different climate. You might as well throw recruiting out the window now.
It's done
It-
because you have a transfer portal now. You don't lock them in. We can't
Yeah.
say you're going to be here. So it's a
Yeah.
whole different deal. It doesn't matter. Who cares?
It created a lot of suspense. Guys, awesome show. Rodney, Yancy, thank you so much. I want to say something. Get y'all back on next Tuesday. We'll have a blast doing it. Winter Timber Outdoors, folks. The shooting sports, there's always something in season. Winter Timber Outdoors, Athens, Alabama. Open every day of the week. They've got all the shotguns, rifles, handguns in the store. Also, all the gear you need. Sitka, Dixie decoys, duck camp. They've got it all. Winter Timber Outdoors. They're expanding in the footprint that is the Southeastern Conference. Deer stands. Right now, duck season's over. It's still the conservation season for goose hunting. You can get all the gear for that. Also, turkey season will start in March in the South. You never can be too prepared for next duck season. Decoys. Find out what they got going on now. Rete Masimara, buy one, get one. Take a picture of that QR code. Let them know you heard about them on SEC Sidelines Sports Network. For executive producer Brendan Martin,
Wait,
let
you're
me
not
say
gonna
something.
promote?
Yeah,
You're not going
that's
to
what I'm
promote
going to.
tonight's show?
No, I'm going to say something. I'm going to say tonight, but before we get to tonight, we start a new show today. In addition to this show, I'll be teaming up with Ronnie Sanders. He is AU Undercover. We'll be doing a show today at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central on AU Undercover, covering Auburn.
We'll have them right here on this network too.
Right
So
on this channel. Yeah. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And Brendan,
this will be on how it goes. We'll have an Auburn show tonight. It'll all be under SEC Sidelines. This is our first step in expansion, guys. We're now at a new year, and this is our next step. We're going to start onboarding different podcasts from specific schools, and we're going to start housing them in different places and partnering with the people that we know bring the same things that we do, the truth, great journalism, that care about the sport and curate these things. We're also going to curate old stories from the past, great journalists. We have a really big rollout happening in the next 6 months, especially for football season. So check out this show tonight. There will be subsequent shows. Then after that show, the Buddy Martin show will be on, talking Gator sports, right here on SEC Sideline Sports Network. So, strap it on, guys, because we're doing it. Like we're about to really go forward with some big heavy hitters. We're excited, and we want you all to be a part of it. So check it out tonight, 4 p.m. Eastern. Wait, is that right, Rob?
5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central on this channel.
On this channel. So check it out, guys.
It'll be a lot of fun. And look, guys, we're growing because we've got great supporters, great sponsors, lots of viewers. The only easy day was yesterday. So we're here to put out content. And Brendan, thank you for saying that the other night. We don't want to talk about those two other topics as little as we can. People are fatigued. They're tired of it. Tony Barnhart was right on your dad's show last week when he told us, all they care about is the games. And there are distractions, but life is about being focused, not distracted. We are going to focus on the SEC. Most often, Christ and the least among us. We're the most blessed people in the greatest country in the history of the world. Share the show and support our sponsors and our guests. We'll see you today at 5 p.m. Eastern on this channel with Ronnie Sanders and AU Undercover. Thanks for watching.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.